Over the Christmas break, we've been doing some more of the interviews that we started earlier this year, talking with people inside the automotive industry. And I don't mean talking exclusively to salespeople or to the company CEOs, but to people who are involved with making cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter vehicles from day one. Most of these people have very long established careers in the automotive industry. They know their stuff. And they're the kind of people that we don't normally get to talk to, kind of the people that aren't normally interviewed by the mainstream media. And so today it is my great pleasure to welcome Mike Boike, who is responsible for building that very massive production facility that Lucid Motors has just built in Arizona, in Case Grande, Arizona. Mike, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show today. It is something that's kind of completely different to what you've done previously in your career. Why don't you talk about how you got to Lucid in the first place? So your career to date.
Yeah, so thank you, Nikki, for having me here today. It's great, just to talk about the factory and everything we've been able to accomplish so far here at Lucid. It's been an amazing ride. If I look back at my history, yes, I started automotive in tier one out of college, working for BASF, a big automotive coating supplier. And then, I transferred over to Chrysler, to, building a lot of Jeep Grand Cherokees back in Detroit. So, I'll say I spent, 10 years at Chrysler, then I had an opportunity to go launch Kia's first plant in North America. That was an exciting time, met some great people. Kind of a startup of sorts for Kia in North America, which was my first start at really starting from the ground up. Fortunately, had a huge opportunity to head back to GM for 5 years in the manufacturing engineering side of the house, where we got to set the global standards for materials and equipment and facilities there, and learned a lot from some very smart people. And then Lucid called, right? It's a great opportunity. One, to say, we've got an opportunity here. We have a great team. We have a great product, and we're going to build a new car factory. And it's going to be from the ground up, so it's one of those rare opportunities to say, okay, let's go build a new car factory.
And it's a really important thing to say, because to note is that, normally in the career of an automotive specialist who specializes in manufacturing production lines, you're normally working with the process of retooling and adapting existing facilities. It's not a case that you normally get where a company rings you up and goes, yeah, we've got a field. We want you to make cars in a building that you help, bring together and spit out at the other end. In terms of working in previous positions where you were very often working with retooling, re-engineering, and figuring out how to mass produce a vehicle that the vehicle design team and engineering team have got, a functional prototype. And then you guys come along and go, yeah, we have to turn that functional prototype into a production intent vehicle on the production line, a validation vehicle, and then finally a series production vehicle. How different is the process when you are starting with an existing production line that you have to adapt versus what you've had with Lucid, which is, this is a completely new start?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences. Some of those, when you're in the traditional automotive, it's not just the equipment in the facility, it's all the processes that come along with it that ensure a quality product is being built. All these quality systems and validations, equipment BIOS, all the people and resources that you have in a traditional OEM, all of a sudden aren't there. So you have to be very creative. You have to be very resourceful in how you do that. You have to have the right partners. You have to have a network. I rely on my network all the time. That's a big part of answering questions that I may not have that expertise in house. So there, you got to be, it's a huge opportunity, but it's been a lot of fun.
Now, it's very different, I would assume, to produce a a brand new vehicle on a brand new platform in a brand new facility that is several thousand miles away from Detroit than it is to be building a new production plant in, say, Ann Arbor or, or somewhere else, in the region. That must
That's right.
have been quite a challenge for you guys. Obviously, there are some reasons why Lucid decided that Casa Grande was the best location to produce the
Okay.
Lucid Air, but it must have been a challenge compared to what you would have been used to in Michigan.
Yeah, a little bit. Now remember the big three also have plants all over the country. So regardless of where your headquarters is, it's a global economy. I mean, we bring equipment, we bring people, we bring resources in from all over the planet. So in one aspect, yes, it's different because it's Arizona. Arizona's not yet an automotive big production of automotive vehicles. So when we look at that end of it, like, but what does Arizona have? There's a lot there. Our headquarters is in California. We have that close proximity. It's got an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure, roads, water, electric, really close to the property that we have. Very important when you're trying to set up a facility. And it's also got the support of the local governments and the state governments. And we have a nice proximity to the supply chain in the US as well as globally. There's a lot. And it's like a technology hub there in Arizona, too. It's building up. We got cars on the road already, self-driving cars on the road in Arizona. So it's building economy, it's technology driven. It's a perfect match for Lucid.
Now, obviously, I can't talk about producing vehicles without talking about, I guess, one of your closest rivals, and that's Tesla, who famously took its first factory over. It took the Numa production facility over and basically started from there. How did you spec a facility from the ground up to ensure that you don't run into some of the challenges that other companies have run into, whether it's Rivian, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Lordstown Motors, who's currently battling around in this massive facility without seemingly having a whole lot of production line right now. How do you get, how do you hit the ground running when you are building from scratch?
And you have a rare opportunity here and you have to get it right. So it means you got to consider every possible option. So we looked at 60 sites around the country, greenfields and brownfields. It wasn't like we took this, lightly. And we also looked at contract manufacturing. And you have to look at all these things when you're looking at what you're trying to do, and you have to evaluate. In the end, we had to set our criteria, what we're trying to do.
Right.
Brownfield is an option, but it's got to be the brownfield that we're going to get, match what Lucid's DNA is going to be. To us, when we looked at the available brownfields, they were short-term, strategies. Long-term, we always want to be future ready, and the greenfield is the way to go. If you want looking towards the future, you want to be energy efficient, you want to be high productivity, you want to take advantage of the state-of-the-art equipment and processes out there. Starting from the ground up for us was a key criteria and a way to go.
Lucid is starting with a modest production run, modest production plan. And you mentioned, you did look at contract manufacturing. And I think a lot of people watching this might not know what we're talking about there. It's the equivalent of companies like Magna and other companies who run and own and operate their own production facilities, and a car company comes along and says, this is the vehicle we wish you to build. We will buy your facility's manufacturing capacity for this run. We will buy each finished vehicle for you. It's different for different companies. So talk to us about why Lucid went that route to build its own facility when right now it is producing a luxury vehicle that traditionally may have been produced by someone like Magna or one of the other many contract manufacturing companies around the world.
Yeah, so when we looked at that contract manufacturing, there's a couple of things that you also got to compromise. One is the quality, being control of the quality of that vehicle. You got to these factories building. You're going to build with the equipment and the processes they have. If you want to modify that, then you gotta really consider that extra cost. So you look at the whole picture. Contract manufacturing is not inexpensive. Again, it's a short-term strategy. Yes, it would get us off the ground and say, let's get off the ground and then go build a factory. But that's, for us, was not future ready. We want to get the vehicle off the ground, control the quality, control in the location where we're at, and we get to have this expandable. If you can come up with a way to expand the plant, start small and go wide, that is the answer. And that was the challenge. How do I start small and expand the plant? And this is what we're able to do.
And of course, with electric vehicles, anything you can do to lower the cost of producing that vehicle is going to help, because whichever way we cut it, batteries are still expensive and they do drive up the cost. Obviously, Lucid has an advantage because it has a background in batteries, thanks to its work with its Sativa brand in Formula E. One of the things I think that is kind of interesting and unique, and I haven't encountered it at any other automaker, maybe you can tell me if it is in fact unique, is that Lucid has the Case Grande production facility, but then at its headquarters, on the east side of the San Francisco Bay, it has its own, what I would call like a miniature production line in its headquarter facility. Can you tell us a little bit about that, why it exists and what the benefits are to Lucid further down the line, especially in the age of automation?
Yes, and again, it goes back to our future-ready mindset. When a lot of startups will go to, and there's plenty of outside resources to go build your pilot vehicles. And when we looked at those are out of state. And when we looked at the costs, strictly the cost and what we are gaining by flying all of our engineers across the country, right? And what we were getting from that. And we're like, wow, we have this facility here. Not an easy thing to do to say, okay, overnight, let's go ahead and build a pilot plant. Very difficult, extremely difficult. But also part of the mindset, I go, this sets us up for the future. And when we start looking at our rest of our vehicles coming down the line, the right answer is to build the pilots right there in the Bay Area. And that's it took a heck of a challenge. You got to lay it out. You got to get the equipment. You got to set up the processes. You need the right people, a small team. It's the same team that's building the factory, designing the factory, is also designing and building this pilot line. But the benefits were absolutely, worthwhile. It's now you have all the engineers there. You got the equipment. We can validate our manufacturing process. And manufacturing engineering sitting, hand by hand, talk about the differences between a large OEM and a small OEM. It's one team. It is one team of manufacturing and product engineering, figuring out what's the best way to build the greatest car that we can. And it's paid huge benefits. And now we're set going forward. Now we have that facility that's ready it's future ready. And that's what we want.
One of the things that I was told when I toured Lucid's California headquarters was that it also means that you guys can work on any modifications or fixes or issues with the production line without having to take the entire production line apart, without having to halt production. And also, as you say, it brings the engineers closer to the production line. Is this the first time that this has happened in the electric auto world? Are you aware of anybody else who's doing the same thing?
I'm not aware if anybody else has got that much tight similarities between the pilot, especially on the powertrain side. The body paint, general assembly. Yes, there's probably companies out there similar, but on the powertrain, we have a very detailed pilot line set up in New York that's paid off huge benefits. So when we make a change at the pilot, they can see the same problems that we're going to see inside.
When you start producing a new vehicle on an existing production line, you are having to ensure that production line very often is not dedicated to just one model. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you either have to get that vehicle being produced on a line that vehicles are already being made on, or you have to stop the whole line and halt it and make modifications to an existing production line so that the old models and the new models can both be made side by side. And very often that means you end up with, specific break-off points in the production line where different vehicles go different ways. Now, we know that Lucid is working on more than one vehicle. Let's leave it at that. Hints have been dropped. How have you worked to ensure that this modular construction technique can be applied to future models? And was that a concern when you were building the production line and designing the production line to make that switch between models as quick as possible?
One of our assumptions, and everything starts with assumptions at the design phase, was we're going to have to be absolutely flexible in building a wide range of vehicles. And you have to account for that. And there's techniques now in the industry that have come across that make this much more simpler to do. But you have to look at each shop. The body shop is a little different than the paint shop. Paint shop's a little different than general assembly when it comes to product sensitivity. For example, if I looked at just the paint shop alone, it's a tough question when you're a startup. We're trying to get this Lucid Air off the ground. And then we got to ask ourselves, what's the largest vehicle I'm ever going to put through there in the next 40 years, right? And so we have to really start getting with our design folks. Again, a close team, it's easy to do, is let's really look at the range of vehicles and because you got to tell me today what I'm going to have to put through that factory. And some of those considerations, there's a lot of conversations on flexibility, how many different platforms, what's the flexibility lines, what are we going to do with these vehicles? I mean, it's all that flexibility is absolutely critical to success. You have to keep design to have that opportunity to still, open up the window as much as they can.
When you are, thinking about a production line being constructed and commissioned, certainly it's something that you would have traditionally thought would take many years, from initial commitment to through to the planning, the permitting, then getting a contractor. Getting a contractor on board. This process can take several years before you even consider retrofitting the factory. Now, Lucid managed to do almost the other companies have done it, but Lucid has gone from a completely bare site to a functioning production line producing, I think, beta vehicles.
Correct.
In 365 days. It wasn't a year because it was a leap year, but at 365 days, you went from there's nothing to now we've got cars rolling off the production line. Not series production, and we're going to come to the production process in a second.
Right.
How do you even project manage and plan for that? It seems mind-blowing. How many different kind of groups did you have to coordinate with? What was the process? Talk me through that.
Yeah, it is the biggest challenge. So not only are you trying to launch a new car and a new factory and a new car company, you're also trying to do it faster than it's ever been done. So with a small team, so you have to be very creative. You have to have good partners. So you got to, we do get world-class partners that help you. But in the end, even for them, this was extremely challenging. So you're almost into this really design, engineering, and build on the fly. And you're doing it all at once. Not easily done. And you can only do with very qualified people who have been in this business for a long time and know how to handle that. And you also need when you talk to permits, you also got to have a commitment and a nice relationship with the city. So this is how we're going to do this. And they're fully on board. So a lot of factors have to come into place. It's very challenging. And just to make it more challenging, because that's a little boring, just throw a global pandemic into the middle.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Right? It's another one of these things that we look at it as a huge challenge, but we don't change. We change our actions. We don't we don't stop and wait. We think and push is what we say, and we figure out our workarounds and we keep moving forward.
When you are commissioning a new production line for a new vehicle, or as I said earlier, you're restarting a production line after you've made modifications for a new model, that length of time can take quite a long time for that process to actually engage. How long did you guys take from installing the equipment to actually having those initial prototypes rolling off the production line?
So when we looked at what was very interesting and what happens, again, being flexible in a small team, we started building our beta vehicles up in Newark, and, at their headquarters. And as we started building the factory, and we saw this opportunity of these last beta units, these last 30 some beta units, to say, you know what, let's do body and paint up in Newark, and then we can transfer. We have enough of a pilot line down in General Assembly that's going to be ready. And that was a huge opportunity for us to get cars. Anytime you can run cars through the manufacturing, as soon as you can, you learn so much. So that was a great opportunity. We moved that down, and we started running the parts through that. And that was a matter, certain parts of the process only take a few months. A paint shop on a different note, that's taking 8 months, and that's flying. That's flying. So that's the paint shop is very complicated. You got these two big monuments, right? You got big ecosystem, a big color booth, and these things take a lot of time. That's always a critical path of the factory. But the other system, you take what you get and you take advantage of them.
And with the actual, obviously the production line process, a lot of people don't understand how a vehicle goes from being a design concept sketch to a concept car to a finished vehicle. And we've covered with engineers, we've covered that first bit really well. But with you here now, I think we would be amiss not to cover the in-depth part of going from this is a prototype vehicle that we have built by hand, often in a skunk works or in a side project,
Right.
prior to that vehicle, sometimes even prior to that vehicle's reveal as a concept or an auto show debut car. How do you go from what has been hand built to something that you can run off a production line in incredibly accelerated speeds compared to that hand-built car, which may have taken weeks or months to build? You're now doing it in less than a day.
The key is design for manufacturing. You have to input those manufacturing efficiencies into the design, even those hand-built cars in the beginning. You got to make sure you're working with the engineering. So when they're doing all their CAD work and figuring out the parts, manufacturing is right in the middle of that. We are part of, you can't just work in a bubble, and our engineers are very good. And they understand that too. They know we have to create a vehicle. In the end, we're manufacturing. So all those manufacturing best practices, lessons learned over 100 years of manufacturing, we take the best. What's great about being in a startup in the greenfield, we take the best practices, right? I got a great team. I have a stellar team, all automotive professional car builders. We take the best practices. We work with engineering to make sure those best practices get in. And those worst practices, we like to leave those things out. So when you do that, and we hand build the cars with them, then we learn even more, and then we take those best practices, and then when we get to the next release candidates, as we call the production ready intent. But now that's what we're trying to run right now in Case Grande, to trial out and make sure our equipment is all ready to go. And it's this is where the fun begins, because now you got this big factory and all this equipment, and you got to make sure it can process vehicles. Right now, that's what we're doing. We started in body and we started in paint. And General Assembly is coming up here with our first release. We call them release candidates, but these production test cars.
And I think what a lot of people don't understand or don't even realize is that by the time a series production car is rolling off the production line, that production line has already built a huge number of pre-production vehicles. Can you give us a number roughly so people understand just how hard you have to validate that production line before you
Yeah.
even let a customer car go down that line.
Yes, it's and depending on the car and the complexity, for us, it's going to be over 100 vehicles that we're going to use to test out our systems. They have to be right. You have to get them perfect. Our customers are, the premium luxury, market. We understand that, and we're looking to not just get in and compete. We're in there to win. We're not going in to just hopefully we get off the ground. No, what we're actually going to be, we got the process, I got the people, and we got the material, we got the design. We're going to fine tune this car. The parts, the process have to get married. And so when we get to a customer car, it's ready to go.
So when you have a car that is very heavily automated even when you are building it, as opposed to hand-built companies, and there are some companies that are well known for their hand-built teams. I mean, Toyota, for example, is very famous for having its little special workshop of artisan hand-built engineers that literally build the very very high-end Lexuses. They built the Toyota Mirai for a while by hand
Sure.
because it was just unusually more cost effective to do it with people than it was to do it with robots because of the economies of scale involved. You guys are going to be using a fairly heavily automated production line.
That's great.
And I've toured a lot of different production lines around the world. Sometimes they are incredibly automated. Sometimes they're not. I mean, Mahindra, for example, when I was in India a couple of years ago, I got to see a couple of vehicles being built there in Bengaluru. And pretty much the entire production line was manual. My question to you is it easier or harder to QC vehicles, quality control vehicles, when they've been built by hand or when they've been built by robots? And maybe you can talk about that final inspection process.
So when we look at automation, when you look at body shops and putting these panels together, you talk about body gaps. That process is heavily automated to make because the quality requirements are very high, and that accuracy is absolutely critical. We're talking half a millimeter that we're trying to put these parts onto a car. And then you step into the paint process. If you want that high luxury finish, that high glossy finish, you can't get that by hand. That has to be automated as well as getting the corrosion protection that people will get on their vehicles as well. So that is heavily automated. Now, when you get to the general assembly side, putting the parts on the car, there's only a few automated processes along that line. And those is heavily manual. And you need a very strong manual, what we call manufacturing execution system, where you have the computer screen that tracks the car, tells the operator exactly what parts to put on the car and how. And then we have quality BIOS where we check every part of the car at the end of each line to make sure everything is done right. So when we get to the final quality check, because we did all of our in-process checks, right? We're almost guaranteed, not guaranteed, there's no guarantee things happen in the manufacturing process, but that's why you check things. But we do a double check and it's almost a validation. We check to make sure we take the car out on a little test drive. We test the rolls. We test to make sure all the electronic components work. And to make sure that customer receives their car, they're going to have one big happy smile on their face.
There's a lot of pressure in the automotive world right now to speed up the process of designing and building a vehicle. GM did the Chevrolet Bolt, I think, in less than a year from concept car to series production. Mm-hmm. You've been going at a fair whack as well. Obviously, you've now got two major concerns. You've got to make sure that the vehicles coming off the production line, especially early production vehicles, which are notorious for having problems, it's not maker specific. It's just a thing that happens in the auto world because it's impossible to test for every single thing when you are building for the world. You just cannot possibly expect to solve every problem before it rolls off the production line. But you've also got to make sure that that production line is operating exactly as you planned. Do you think that's easier Or do you think it's easier to be building on an existing production line? Because obviously, with the existing production line, you're going to have to make um, adjustments and allocations that you might not if you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, if you're building on an existing line, what's the negative is the constraints that it puts on a car designer. Once you start us having a greenfield, now we open up the design. They have free reign and say, and then we can work together. Say, and then by working with us, we know what we can change before it's already into the manufacturer. So it is a huge advantage that we're building. This is, we'll be the first greenfield EV startup, greenfield, in North America. And that's a huge advantage because now we're building a car specifically for electric vehicle. And that helps. I mean, that's helped. And I don't have to worry about combustion engine. I don't have to worry about transmission and how all these other processes fit in. So starting from scratch absolutely is an advantage because now I can design the process exactly what I need to be. And then I build a facility around it. That's the advantage of the greenfield. And I can take advantage of all the new technologies out there, the energy efficient systems that make this thing, in our core, a sustainable energy vehicle.
Let's talk about the actual plant and the energy consumption and some of the energy saving measures that you have made. Obviously, being in Arizona, there is less concern about certain things you might have to build in other parts of the US and other parts of the world. Obviously, the potential for solar energy in Arizona is phenomenal. And as you said, the site was located because it's got easy access for transport. There's a railroad, there's plenty of highways nearby, and there's also plenty of local natural resources and energy generating potential. I'm assuming that Lucid is ultimately planning to be carbon neutral in everything it does, and also when it comes to the paint plant, ensuring that everything meets the highest EPA standards.
Yeah.
Are you planning for current standards, or have you actually exceeded current standards and are going down the line further?
We've exceeded. We're looking to exceed. I mean, you hit it on the head. We're trying to be a carbon neutral, and we will be in the future. The other part of it, when we look at a key, you hit it also. The paint process itself is a big part of energy inside of a manufacturing. So we have taken the latest paint process technologies that have come along, and it allows us to reduce the energy and reduce the footprint, which further reduces the energy intake. So, and you got to be careful with these paint processes because once you put them in, you can't modify them. They're there forever. So you got to make sure they're right. So we're able to find the right people, the right team of experts that can say, well, let's put in this new paint process and be able to tweak it and make sure we can get the high end quality finish and be energy, conservative. So we are taking the next steps that we see it in the technologies in order to reduce that energy consumption in the factories.
Let's turn our attention now to the workforce. Obviously, traditionally, there are pockets of the US where auto manufacturing is a fairly common job. Obviously, the Midwest being one of them. But in Arizona, unless I'm very much mistaken, you are the first new electric car startup in the region to have a facility. You're the first US or EV startup to make a factory from scratch and to complete it from scratch. But you need a workforce. So talk to me about some of the things that Lucid has been doing to make sure that you've got the trained staff to work at your new Case Grande facility.
Right. Arizona, no automotive manufacturing, mass automotive manufacturing. And this is a situation we looked at 5 years ago when I first came into Lucid. We've been working on this. We've been working with the local states in the colleges. We set up a training program with some of the local colleges there to get automotive expertise out of their programs. We've also set up with the state a training center at one of the colleges that we're going to use. So before anyone even steps foot in the factory, they're going to go there to get trained on what it is to be in an automotive manufacturing facility. How does the assembly process work? In addition, just to show how important it is, because you have to have a trained workforce. One of the things, I have a very seasoned leadership team, but we also have to establish that culture. And it always comes down, the focus is always on the operator. They have got to have everything they need to be successful. One is that being trained. So the first 100 people that we hired, we hired them in Arizona, and we brought them into Newark, and we trained them, and they helped us build the beta vehicles, the test vehicles up in Newark. So they learned how to build cars. They learned the Lucid culture. They learned how everything functions. And all of a sudden, now they become very, very good. And now we bring them back to Arizona, and now I got people that can train the next workers. So this has helped us, with that curve, and really, really helped, more so on the culture, as much as the culture is learning how to build a car. So it's been a very great program.
Once you've trained your workforce, obviously you need somewhere for them to live. You need somewhere for them to shop and enjoy life. How have you enriched the local community? Because it's not just a case of building a factory, is it?
Oh, it's not. When Lucid showed, when we got there, one of the things we really want to do is be part of the whole community there. Just as an example, for Christmas, we raised a lot of gifts for Toys for Tots. We did a whole canned food drive for the homeless shelters, and we had a big fundraiser for the foster children in the area. So being part of this community is very important to us. Case Grande has been very supportive of everything Lucid's trying to do and helping us in any way they can. And we absolutely intend to give back even more as we start to grow. It's an important part of our culture and what we're trying to do.
I'm really looking forward to seeing this facility firsthand when COVID is over and when people are actually moving again. I did actually drive by, I think probably, it would have been February time. I wasn't far away when we were driving to Fully Charged Live in Austin, Texas, and we drove all the way down from the West Coast. But that was the last time I was in Arizona. I haven't really traveled much this year. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure. But before we go, I have a couple of questions for you. What do you think is the biggest challenge for your team now as you head towards series volume production?
For any automotive maker right now, when you get to this point, is you start running your test vehicles for production, is identifying all your problems so you can resolve them quickly, and then getting them all resolved. Some have negatively referred to this. We love this. Is like, to us, production heaven, and this is what we. The team that I brought on, this is what we do. We like to take this challenge isn't a bad thing. This challenge is a fun thing. We know what's coming. We know there's going to be a lot of issues that we need to resolve, and you have to have the right team with the right mindset, with the right experience to know that not surprised by anything and know how to resolve it. So I have that right team. I know these challenges are coming, but I know I also have the right team to get it done.
And what would you say the thing is that you're most proud of so far about this entire project?
So Lucid's done for me it's been a lot of fun. We've done some great things. You're talking, we built batteries for Formula E. We set up a pilot shop in record time. We've built pilot vehicles up in Newark. We've built a factory faster than I've ever seen done, and it's state of the art. But I gotta say, the number one thing that I'm most proud of building has been the team. It is a team that is very tight knit, and it's very close. And we all come from different, traditional automotive manufacturers. So you're talking about a melting pot of best practices, and we have them all covered. Just about, if we don't have every OEM in the U.S. covered, we know somebody who works there. It's a small environment we work in. We know, there's no plant that somebody doesn't know anybody working in. So and we do talk, and we do offer each other support, if the things come up. So that team is a lot of fun. They know how to get things done. They know how. They don't do it the old way. They lead. They know how to build an organization, and they have fun doing it. So if you ask me what's the number one thing I'm proud of, it's building the team, because when you have a vision of building a team from scratch, you always think, yeah, it's idealistic. But I got to say, the reality out was even more than the idea. It was better than the ideas.
And I think, in some ways, I would say that this is very similar to the automotive journalist world. Most of us know each other.
Right.
You go to enough launch events that you know everybody else. And I think the same is true. The automotive world is generally very close-knit indeed. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to meet you in person at some point and have a little bit of a tour of the facility. And good luck to the rest of the Lucid team as they prepare for their 2021 launch. That I think this year is going to be really exciting. There's going to be lots of different cars coming to market, lots of different new automakers making that first step into volume production. So here's to you and the rest of the team, and I hope that you all have a wonderful Christmas and New Year.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I enjoyed this, and thank you so much for having Lucid. And we are extremely excited to be on the show. But more importantly, we're also so excited about 2021. It's going to be a great year.
What a fantastic conversation. I love having these, and they're totally unscripted, and we just get to talk with really cool people about the world of cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter vehicles. What else is there to say other than to thanks for my $15 to $49 a month patrons who are scrolling up next to me, and special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's John Lyons, Regine Fellows, Jeffrey Songster, and Tazla in the Gong. And of course, thank you to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. You've really made this year possible. Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Vegaback, Sean Ueda, Will, and Ian. Thank you very, very much for joining us. You can, of course, check out all of the cool links below if you would like to become a Transport Evolved supporter. Follow one of the links below. There is a Bitcoin link. There is a Ko-fi link, because we do like our Ko-fi. I've had my coffee here throughout this interview. And of course, you can become a Patreon and get some cool things like interacting with the team. If you want to interact with the team for free, you can go to Discord, which is great fun. The Discord server is really starting to heat up. Lots of cool people talking about all kinds of fun things. We even have a D&D section where we can be really super nerdy. I hope that the rest of your vacation, if you are having one, goes well. If you are working, thank you. I know it is really hard at this time of year to be working when everybody else is spending time with their family, but without you guys, if you are an essential worker, especially if you're in the health profession, thank you for this year. I know it's been hard. I couldn't do what you do. You have my absolute thanks. I'll see you back very soon, but until then, keep evolving.